Hey guys, welcome. We are back here on the Fins Faithful podcast. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. If you're watching on YouTube, guys, make sure you come on over, smash that like and subscribe button, and help support the channel. I really appreciate it. Well, draft week is here. We're about a few days away. Thursday night, I believe 8 p.m. is night one, round one. So we'll get into all that. But the Dolphins also got trade news, right? We got to see, is Ramsey going to get dealt before, during, or after the draft? We'll get into all that. Plus, we'll talk some offensive line prospects and the Dolphins' current O-line with none. Who better to do it than former Miami Dolphin great, icon, and legend, soon to be Hall of Famer. We hope. And Richmond Webb. I hope this time goes better. Your power went out last time, Richmond. Crossing the fingers. If it happens again, we're just gonna sound off.
Bro, I got my fingers and my toes crossed right now. I felt so bad, and I was I couldn't get back on. It couldn't happen first time, but man, you held it down, and I don't like to leave people hanging. And I know we had people tuned into the show, so.
Man, no, it was good. We paid it, man.
Everybody seemed like they said no big deal, but yeah, I just when you try to make a commitment, you try to fulfill it unless it's just something. Man, I appreciate you having me back on the show.
No, I appreciate you coming back on. And I always say this, I'm mind blown how much of a gentleman you are all the time. It gets humbling asking a former player of your stature to come on. You're so kind and sincere. And if anybody didn't have the chance to talk to you behind the scenes, it's real with you, and I appreciate it. So thank you for those. And look, when he said he'd make it up, I had no doubt he would. That's the kind of guy you are. All right. Enough of that mushy stuff here. Let's get into where the draft week. Before that, let's bring it back home here to the news last week, the Jaylen Ramsey stuff, which caught me off guard. The timing was odd. They announced, that tweet that comes out the morning of Chris Grier's pre-draft press conference, which was bizarre. I don't know if you had a chance to see it, Richmond. It doesn't make sense to me. I thought if this is something they were going to do, this should have been done earlier in the offseason. Grier said it wasn't he didn't demand a trade or he didn't ask for more money. So what is it then? It doesn't make sense. What is your take on the whole Jaylen Ramsey stuff?
Yeah, George, I think everybody was caught off guard. Like you said, that late in free agency. But I think the thing is that just was it either right before the season or at the beginning of the season, it just made him the highest paid cornerback. So
yes.
You take the deal to extend the guy, make the highest paid, and then 6-7 months later, you're talking about possibly trading the guy, and it just didn't make sense. I think he's definitely one of the leaders on the team, definitely one of the leaders on the defense. And when you're trying to solidify, I think the defense came together those last probably 3 or 4 games where they really start playing good football, and you said, okay. We kind of got that. We still had pieces we needed to add. Like I say, Chubb will be back, Phillips will be back. It's some pieces that we didn't have that due to injury or whatever, they were going to be back. And then so now you kind of say, okay, focus on keeping Tua healthy. And one way you can do that is shore up the offensive line. And like 2 or 3 weeks ago, Terron Armstead, he made the decision to retire and had a tremendous career with the Dolphins, with the Saints, and just someone I really admired his game because he was one of the best to do it. And then we got the young guys. Okay, so now Patrick Paul is the guy that's got to step up. And I think what I really like about it is the way Terron Armstead did it. He didn't he kind of freed up money in the event that he was seriously considering it. He said, we can work it out on the back end if I decide to come back, but now Patrick Paul knows he's got to step in there and fill those shoes. And so it was other things going on, and we just added. We just added the offensive guard from Pittsburgh. So it seemed like we're trying to make moves to shore up the offensive line, and then you get slapped upside the head and saying, "Hey, one of the best players on the team, we're seeking a trade or what we can get." Like, I'm not there. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I think everybody was caught off guard. I definitely wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, and we'll get into Daniel, Zach. We'll get into the O-line, Patrick Paul, and all that. But with Ramsey, finish it up on that. Do you think it's a case where maybe he's like, let's see what they do this offseason, He doesn't like where the organization's going. He doesn't think this is a team that can make a playoff run. He doesn't like what they've done so far in the offseason. Because, I mean, I know there's the draft, but how much really can the drafts change? Yeah. The draft's not going to elevate you from a playoff team to a Super Bowl contender, really. You'd have to have a heck of a draft, an all-time draft. You think maybe behind the scenes there's a class that maybe they publicly don't want to admit because what other reason could it be, right? You know what I mean?
It's definitely, I believe it's something. I don't know what the reason is, but, when you look at a guy like Jaylen Ramsey, he's been on playoff teams. He's played at the high level, I believe he's played in the Super Bowl. So I'm like, when you get a taste of that, and you can look at the Dolphins roster before he got here, like, we're really not that far away and possibly, underachieving or not liking the way some things are going. I could see that. And even with a guy like Campbell, he was such a tremendous asset to the Dolphins last year, and then he makes the decision to go to the Arizona Cardinals. And that could be a reason, you start looking at, my window is shrinking. I don't have as much time as you think you do because the game goes a lot it goes faster than what you normally want it to, and that definitely could be a possibility. Say, hey, let me just get on with a team that's legitimately trying to, get in there. And then I think was it Chris Grier a couple of weeks ago or within the last week said we're not
rebuilding.
I guess. Yeah. We're rebuilding.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think that kind of.
I don't know what you want to call it, but
yeah, I was just like, okay, it's just. I think it was rebuilding, but it just didn't sound right the way it came out. I was just like, okay.
Oh no. I mean, they can call it what they want to call it, but the facts, there's a draft and there's post June 1st, but they'd have to have an all-time kind of off-season. Everything would have to go right, and. You mentioned, the thing with this offseason and this team, and you mentioned a lot of things I want to talk about. But let's go to Terron here real quick because you saw him play. You saw the way you mentioned you liked the way he went out. Two things. What made him so great when you watched him play? What was it that you said, wow, this guy is that guy? What made him great?
Well, I think he was just a naturally gifted athlete, but I think he took his job seriously and he worked at continuing to hone his craft and continue to get better every year. And I think that's why he played at a high level for so long, so consistently. So, and it doesn't take long to recognize guys like that. So when you have the ability and then you maximize an opportunity, but I think the other thing that we're missed from a guy like Terron Armstead on the offensive side of the ball is his leadership skills. I'm sure a lot of the younger offensive linemen looked up to him and he would kind of rally the troops and calm everything down. And I'm sure Patrick Paul, if he wasn't, I would have been picking his brain to try to get as much information, learn how to watch film. Not saying you don't know how to watch film, but you can always – when the veterans they've been doing it at a high level. Sometimes you can pick something you didn't even realize. It might be just something simple, but just little things you can add to your game to help you try to elevate to get your game to get the most out of your potential and stuff like that. So it's just more than just playing left tackle. I think it's the leadership, the way he conducted himself on and off the field. He was just a class act guy that other guys that respected him probably, wanted to model themselves after. And it's tough when you lose a player like that.
Yeah, man. He was a class act, and they're gonna miss him. Something just came to my mind. You talked about Chris Grier. Do you know Chris Grier? Have you met him numerous times? Is he?
I have not met him, but
okay.
I've been on the field, but I haven't had the opportunity to meet him. He seems like he's a nice guy.
Yeah, he seems like almost too nice of a guy.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. To be around that long, he's doing something behind the scenes. All right. You mentioned it. Armstead's departure. Patrick Paul. All right. You went up to the podium. You announced his name. He was you from Houston. He played at the University of Houston. What is it about Patrick Paul that you saw coming out of college, and that you saw from the limited time he played last year that gives you confidence here that he could be the left tackle going forward for the Miami Dolphins?
Yeah, during the draft, didn't know much about him, but I kind of saw him play at U of H, and he was a guy. You look at him, he prototype tackle, so he has the size, the long arms, the good feet. So he has all the intangibles. It's just making that transition from college to the professional level. And so even when we drafted him, I always thought it was good because you had Austin Jackson on the right, you had Terron Armstead. So you got two guys that's been playing, pretty good. Austin Jackson really last year he was hurt, but the year before that, I thought he had a Pro Bowl year. So when you got two really good tackles and Terron Armstead is one of the top in the game, you get to learn and mentor from guys like that. And then when he got the opportunity to play, what I liked about him was, he's got a mean streak and an aggressive side to him. And I seen him getting after guys and trying to finish blocks and stuff like that. So I think he's going to be a really good player for us. So that's what gives me confidence to believe that he can get the job done. Just continue to work on your skills, your technique, but it definitely helps when you have the physical traits, the long arms, the quick weakness, and that definitely helps, especially playing the left tackle or the tackle position.
Yeah, shout out to everybody in the chat, the Dive Bar podcast. What's going on? I'm going to mention the Dive Bar here because Terron Armstead made a comment about Patrick Paul, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Finn, Sammy, okay. How you doing from the Finn's Post? Brian, the Backup Bench podcast. Everybody, we're currently live here. Come on over if you're watching on Twitter, please come on over to YouTube, guys. Smash that like, subscribe. Come on over and watch with us here on YouTube. We really appreciate it. We're joined by Dolphins icon Richmond Webb. All right, Richmond, speaking of the guys at the Dive Bar, they had Terron Armstead on, and he made a comment that kind of I thought was real cool and interesting. He says, the one thing about Patrick Paul is in practice, no pads, to be able to keep an edge rusher engaged without pads on is very rare. Like for the tackles to be able to do that. What does that mean? Do you agree with that statement? Like not a lot of guys can keep guys engaged with no pads on. I guess the hand grip, the strength. What are your thoughts on that comment?
Yeah, he's got to have really good feet, really good hand placement. And like you said, when you don't have pads on, you really don't have much to really hit at or grab on. So when you strike, you got to be pretty accurate. And for him to consistently do that over and over again, if you can do that without the pads on, it's much easier if you can do that with the pads off, it's much easier to do with the pads on because you got a bigger surface area to try to hit and this and that. So that's pretty impressive. That's something that I wouldn't know, but with a guy like Terron Armstead that's there with in practice, you do the one-on-ones and this and that. And a lot of times they're not in pads. So for him to still be that effective, that is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And, of course, Armstead didn't practice a lot. So Paul got probably a ton of reps in practice at left tackle. So let's continue on the offensive line. Let's go to the guy who everybody hates that they brought back, poor Liam Iikenberg. Everybody's bashing on Liam Iikenberg. Here's the thing about Liam. You watch him play. Is he that bad, or is it – I have this theory that he plays solid, but then he makes 2 or 3 mistakes that are just so memorable. It kind of overshadows everything. When you watch Liam, what do you see? Is he what all the fans say? Is he that bad of a guard, or do you think he's capable of being a starting guard in this league?
Well, I'll say this. I think last year it wasn't as bad as the year before, and I think he kind of played musical chairs. He was at, I think, left guard, and then he had to move to center, and so I think he was a tackle in college, and I think one of the things that kind of hurts Liam at tackle is they said his arm length is short for a tackle, so that's probably why they moved him into it. But the thing you gotta be able to play when you play guard or center, you got to be able to anchor. And what I mean is you got those big defensive tackles when they come to bull rushing that you got to be able to stop it firm and keep the pocket, where it doesn't collapse on the quarterback so he can step up and still throw the football. So then last year they had him, on the right side with Austin Jackson. And like I said, he was okay, but I don't think he ever hit that stride where they said, okay, this is for sure, our right guard, and he's going to be there for several years come down the road. So I think the thing is they signed him. They want to give him another opportunity. Only thing I said is bring in some competition to say, okay, does he really want it, or does the other guy want it? Let it be a fair open competition. Let the best man win the position. I think that's the way you get better as a team. If you bring in guys that are just substandard that you really don't have to compete against or really work to be on the field, then you're not doing any service. But as long as they bring in guys for him to compete, if he loses the job, he loses. But if he wins it, you can win the job, but you got to be able to maintain and keep the job. And as long as they bring in quality guys that's going to be competitive and make everybody work, I think that's the best way you get better.
Yeah, agreed. And hopefully they bring in some quality guys starting this Thursday, right, in the draft. But they got so many needs that you're not going to be able to fill them all. All right, a guy who I thought they sorely missed last year was AJ Austin Jackson, a right tackle. He played guard he started at left tackle, then played some guard in his career, then he finally found his home there at right tackle. How have you seen the evolution there of Austin Jackson? And it looks like a kid who really wanted to get better, right? Like he really and that's something I always say, we can scout players, but the trait of one of the guys, that want to get better, the will to get better, you can't measure that. It seems like AJ Austin Jackson had that. What are your thoughts on his evolution this last few years?
I was one of his biggest fans. I think he possibly would have benefited from at least one more year in college because I think he was 20 years old when we drafted him out of USC. But even looking at the tape, I remember when he came out, just a very athletic, gifted athlete. Feet, he could pull, he could do all of it. I just don't think he had enough reps or experience in college. And so you come here and he competed. And the left side, like I say, started at guard. I thought he was a tackle, but when they moved him to right tackle and they had him beside Robert Hunt, I mean, he found his niche, and they really – I hated to see that tandem broke up because when you get two guys that play that well side by side, it's hard to lose like that because now you've got some continuity. You got two guys that are really competing. Robert Hunt, Pro Bowl, and then not last year but the year before. Like I say, I thought Austin Jackson played at that level, and if you any way possible, you want to try to keep a tandem like that together because you don't have to worry about that. You can just maybe put a guy on the other side, and then you already had Armstead over there, so you show up the left side. It's just it's gravy. And, I look at lines like the Philadelphia Eagles. When you get that offensive line, it's your running game, your pass, everything just seems to just take off. And I think that was something we was missing. But the thing is, like you say, last year he had the injuries, the high ankle sprain. I know he dealt with a couple times. As long as he stays healthy, he's one of the best right tackles in the game.
Wow. High praise for Mr. Austin Jackson. We're here with Richmond Webb. Dolphins great offensive tackle. We're talking Ramsey, Dolphins, O-line, draft, everything with Richmond. Make sure you guys come on over to YouTube and check us out here on the channel. Okay, so you mentioned that player Hunt was playing next to him at right guard. They brought in James Daniels, who looks to be probably sliding in that right guard. What do you know about James? Came from Pittsburgh. Did you follow him in his career? What do you know about James Daniels?
Yeah, I didn't follow him a lot, but I remember he played with Pittsburgh. I remember he had some injuries, I think, last year where he didn't play a lot, but he does play. He's the type of guy that he's definitely a starter in this league. So as long as he overcomes the injuries he had and he rehabbed and all that, okay, we should be fine on the right side. And hopefully if him and Austin Jackson get some continuity, I think that'll be that'll be good. But you bring in a guy like that, like you said, we signed Iikenberg back, but it's going to be a deal where this is not really your position. We're looking to upgrade, and I think they're looking to upgrade the interior offensive line. So I know with him being a starter in the league, he's not coming in to say, I'm just happy to be here and sit on the bench. He's going to come in expecting to play, expecting to start. So I say, hey, let the best man win the job. So as long as I think if he stays healthy, I think it was definitely an upgrade bringing him in.
Yeah, it still looks like they got one more spot to fill. It could be through the draft. It could be through post-June 1st or after the draft they sign somebody. But as if the offensive line, if they lined up today, right, let's say it's Jackson, Daniels, Brewer, I guess Iikenberg at guard, and Paul at tackle. I'm not very comfortable with that. How do you feel? You basically lost. You downgraded from Armstead to Paul. Obviously, we don't know how good Paul will be, but Armstead is a potential gold jacket guy, right? And you upgraded with you upgraded from Daniels from Robert Jones or Iikenberg, however you want to look at it. How do you feel about the line if it was today they lined up?
Yeah, I think the question mark is I think Patrick Paul. Yeah, he has all the tangibles, but to settle in and get comfortable and be consistent on and play at that level, I think that's something. But I think we've seen Iikenberg at the left guard position, and he seemed like he played a little better at the right than he did the left. So if he loses the right guard position, I think we're gonna bring in somebody. So I wouldn't feel too comfortable with that. I think we need to just I think we need to bring in some more competition.
Yeah,
and then that, because if you're gonna do what you said and you realize that really hindered our running game last year. A lot of times we could run outside, but couldn't run in between the tackles, up interior and this and that. And when you can run both ways, it just makes it harder on the defense. And I think we need a good running game to help take the pressure off of Tua, where you don't have to throw it 35, 40 times a game. It's just a much more balanced attack. And I think it'll help the offense overall. So I'm still hoping that they're going to bring in a couple more linemen to kind of help upgrade the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just get worried that the way they're talking, that they're going to settle. They're comfortable with Liam. I know in the building they like Liam, and he ends up starting again. You've heard Grier talk, and I agree with you about Tua. Tua's best with the running game. Like, Tua's not best throwing the ball 45 times. He's best being that point guard, that John Stockton, get it, have the running game offset him, open things up, and he can be a surgeon and just pick you apart. That's where I think they went wrong with this build. They thought they had to get all speed on the outside, and that worked. But then the league caught up with their fastball. Right now, they got to develop a changeup. Right, they started hitting the fastball.
It works for about the first 8-9 games, and then the second half of the season, it kind of like you've hit your plateau. You kind of plateaued off. But like you said, if you can keep mixing it up, for running it, this and that, that's where Tua, he shines in that. And it's just a lot less pressure, because if people know you're going to throw the ball 40 times a game, it's a lot. And the defensive line just peel their ears back, and they're just coming, and you start getting all the different games and stuff like that. So, yeah, if you can keep a balanced attack, it's better for everybody.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right. I want to get into a little bit of, you mentioned it on the top of the show, the culture, the locker room, but I want to get into some issues that kind of, I think, lead me that way. Let's start with Tyreek, right? We started last year at the end of the year, basically the end of the third quarter, call it what you want, quit, pulled himself out of the game. It showed a lack of leadership from the top, from the head coach. I can't imagine Shula, somebody doing that with Shula as coach. So, and all the incidents he's had in this offseason, let me ask you this. Whether you want to call it as a former player, as a teammate, how would you handle the Reek situation? Would you want somebody like that on your team, even though he's probably your best player or one of your top 2 or 3 players?
Well, I think when you're the best player, you got to be not only the athletic part, but the mental side of it too. And he was definitely frustrated after that last game, and that's what was reported. He took himself out the game, so it's nothing I made up or you made up.
Yeah.
And then the post game interview, he's basically like, I'm out of here. I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's like really frustrated where he just wanted to get out. So I think they let that calm down a little bit, and then they met with him. I don't know what was said. And then I guess it was a mutual agreement, and he was like, no, I want to be a Dolphin and this and that. But I think that's tough if you're a teammate and, you're in the middle of battle and a guy is not hurt or he just makes a decision, pull his stuff out. I think the thing that comes in the back of your mind if you're one of the teammates is you saying, well, if we get in the line of fire again, and you get frustrated, how do we know you're going to be able to, persevere and continue to just, even though you're not getting the results that you want, I don't think nobody was, but, you got to be able to hang in there good or bad. We're all teammates. We win together, we lose together. That's the kind of mindset you got to have. And so that's the thing. I think that's something that, even though his teammates might have an issue with it. Some of them probably do, some of them probably don't. But you got to make that decision as a head coach and a GM. How much is that going to affect your locker room and this and that? And so they made a decision that they think, they're going to work it out, and hopefully it works out for the best.
Yeah. Did you experience anything like that, or how, and I don't know, maybe not the best player, or Shula, you weren't playing that game with Coach Shula. That wasn't happening.
None of the coaches, I played Shula, Jimmy Johnson, Dave Wanstead one year, and then went to Cincinnati with Dick LeBeau. And I never, thank goodness I never had to experience anything like that, because it's just, like you say, when you're one of the best players in the game, not just at receiver, but he definitely has the skill set, but that's just you don't want to be remembered that way. I'll just put it that way. So hopefully he got it together, he put that behind him, and he's ready to go.
Yeah, let's hope so, because and then he had the other incident off the field, wasn't arrested, but a domestic dispute. Just it seems like it never stops with him. I'll be honest with you, Richard. My opinion is I almost think at some point it's addition by subtraction, especially the way I think this offense does need to change. Now, look, they're definitely not going to be as dangerous with Tyreek. Like what Tyreek does as a gravity puller and to attract attention is unreal. It opens a lot of other stuff up. But at some point, you got to look at the organization, the bigger picture. And that leads me to my next point, Coach McDaniel, right? Look, I've heard some things behind the scene about the players, how they don't, they're kind of running they're running the prison, and they kind of don't believe in the coaching staff. A lot of things you hear, right? But that's here nor there. But my question is, he came in as an ultimate player empowerment coach. He's your friend, that's his style. As soon as he got on the plane with the talking to Tua on FaceTime, that's been his gig, right? The Rolex watch, the funny jokes, which aren't funny anymore. Now, can he become a slight adjustment? I say slight because you can't change your personality to be more disciplinarian. Do you, as a former player, would you buy that? Like, obviously it can't be a drastic change, but can you even slightly make that change, or is it too late?
I think if it's an issue, you got to make the change. And I think this is his first job as a head coach, even though he's in like his fourth year or whatever. But even as a player, you see things, you correct it, and then that's how you continue to get better, right? So if that's the issue with him, I think you, as a coach, you're managing so many different players with different personalities. Some guys don't need a heavy dose of, you got to stay on them managing this, but some guys do. It's just you got to figure out who needs what, and then try to be consistent with what you're presenting. You can't, sometimes you can let stuff slide, or something. Like you have a conversation, say, we're not going to operate this way. And I'm not saying he's got to be a disciplinarian and crack the whip. That doesn't work for everybody. You got to be who you are, but you still got to be consistent, and people got to respect what you're doing and what you're saying. And, I don't have to disrespect you as a man, but if I come to you and say, hey, this is not, we don't do, Miami Dolphins, this is not the way we do things here, blah, blah, blah. I'm expecting you, whoever it is to, fall in line with what everybody else does, this and that. And I think that's how you correct it. You can't keep sliding. And when other guys see that it's not being corrected or whatever, and that's where an issue could come in. So I don't know a lot about that, but if that's what they're saying as far as, he's too buddy or whatever, then you got to dial it back a little bit or something. Yeah, you got to get that fixed.
Yeah, it's hard though. I think it's hard, like, because you go in there with that kind of, that's who you are, and they'll look at you cross-eyed, like a little bit, like, boy, come on, man, that's not you. That's not you. You ain't built like that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, it'll be interesting. I think this is a big year for Coach McDaniel, and I see Armando has a question. I'll get to this question in a second, but while I'm on the point, I want to talk about the locker room leadership. How much of that, the locker room leadership, the chemistry, does that translate into winning? Because it's very important. And if so, who do you see on this team right now to kind of take that role with Armstead? You mentioned Armstead gone, Campbell gone. But how important is it?
It's very important. I would say, definitely Campbell. Armstead was the leader. Two quarterback normally is the leader. Jaylen Ramsey, I would consider him to be a leader. Zach, he would be a leader. It's certain guys, the way they show up and play, and a lot of times people think when you're a leader, you got to be real vocal, and that's not necessarily the case. When people see the way you come to work, you conduct yourself, and then when you show up on Sundays and you continue, they will listen to you because they're gonna respect you. Everybody can't be vocal because then you got too many people talking. But when I came in, that was one of the things I didn't have to worry about because we had Dan Marino, we had Duper and Clayton, and when you saw the way those guys worked, you understood why they were so good and how they had the results on Sundays. And if you weren't going to be a part of that, they didn't want you out there on the field. They were trying to win. And so you had to either fall in line or, they're going to get you up out of there. So I had strong leadership from the beginning and eventually became probably one of the leaders. I'm real vocal, but people respected, me. Tim Bowens was another guy, not real vocal, but just the way he played, y'all respected Timbo, this and that. So it's different leaders, but some a little bit more vocal. Dan was Dan's still the vocal guy.
Yeah.
So
the one thing I've noticed with Dan, boy, Dan ain't he believes in himself, boy. I'll tell you that.
And no question, yeah.
He's got, you could tell. What if Dan was the quarterback and Tyreek takes himself out in the third quarter? Does Dan get out of the game and run to the sideline and grab him and bring him back in?
He don't get out the game, but we're gonna get that corrected on the sideline. And as many cameras it is now, And I think everybody could understand the sign language if Dan was over there. He's like, no, we don't do that here. No.
Put it this way, he would have been playing in the fourth quarter. Is that what you're saying?
He'd have been in there, no question.
Yeah, so glad. Timbo, he was a bad man. If you want to go down a back alley, you want Timbo with you. Is that true?
If you get in the bar fight, that's the first guy I was grabbing off the team right there. Yeah. He was. Nobody messed with Timbo. I don't think that's anybody that played. Yeah, he was that guy.
When they say country strength, that's what he was. That's what he was about, right?
Man, yeah. A lot of people don't know, but it was just the way the defense was designed. But I remember when he first got here, wasn't a bad pass rusher, but it was like the way the defense was designed with him and Darryl Gardner was, they took on the double teams and let the linebacker scrape, and Zach, made the plays and stuff, and never complained. He was just a guy that did what was best for the team. But just showed up and played and this and that. And that's why he's so well respected. I was glad I wasn't able to make it down, but I was so happy that he got put up in the Ring of Honor because he's so deserving and he's long overdue for that. So yeah, I was definitely happy about that.
Oh yeah, he was fun to watch. And how was Daryl like? You mentioned Daryl Garner. I remember that draft. I was probably like, my early teen years, and that's when I really started I loved the draft when I was a kid. That's why I do so much draft stuff. But that's when probably the first draft that I really understood what was going on. And I remember it just being this physical specimen. What could Daryl have been better?
Yeah,
or was he played upright? Didn't he though?
I think he, he was a physical. I think he was a little raw, but just the way he worked in practice, I think that's why he continued to get better. But with him, I mean, that defense we had back then, you had Daryl and Timbo, and you had JT and Trace Armstrong on the other side, and you had like Robert Jones, Zach, Derek Rogers, and then you had Patrick Surtain, you had Sam Addison, Brock Marion, and who am I missing?
Sean Wooden?
Sean Wooden. Man, I'm telling you, that defense was one of the best
defenses in
the league at the time. It was just they was and they would get hyped. Yeah, that was a hell of a defense. So that's what I'm saying. He was playing pretty good, but when you got that many really good players on defense,
let me get to Armando's question. I thought that was good. He asked, is there a different approach blocking for a guy like Tua compared to Marino? How the respect was earned? I bet he's asking how the approach for blocking for Tua versus Marino. Thank you, Armando.
Yeah, I think the difference is Tua is more mobile than Dan. Both of them do have a quick release, but Dan was a pocket quarterback where Tua, a lot of times they can get him outside pocket. He stays in the pocket a lot, but he has the capability to, run and get the first down. And Dan rarely did that. He was over a guy that was just going to drop back, stay in the pocket, and just throw the football. So it's a little tougher at times. Normally you're going to see more games. And when I say games, between the defensive line, the different line stunts and this and that. And then a lot of times teams wouldn't worry about containment against us because they knew Dan wouldn't run. So all the rules were kind of broken, blocking for somebody like Dan, where if they lose containment, if Tua sees, he just got to scramble out and run and get the first down, keep the chains running. And something we didn't have, but, Dan would find it, boom, 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 and just shred a defensive up. So, both great quarterbacks, but totally different, two totally different styles.
Yeah. Shout out to Armando for the question. Octane, Skunk, Spirit, Gloria, aka Spirit Fingers in the chat. Everybody in the chat, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for everybody watching. If you're watching anywhere else, come on over to YouTube and help us support here. Hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to check out all our content we got coming out, including a lot of draft stuff and the previous draft shows we had and the stuff we got coming up. Richmond, all right. So when you talked about, you said the leaders in your were Dan was a big leader, right? Dan and your top guy, those are the leaders in that team.
Dan was the leader.
Yeah.
And we had some sub leaders, but yeah, Dan was the guy.
Dan was okay. I was gonna ask you that. If we get I wanted to do a show where you and Keith were on. I tried to get in contact with Keith. He hasn't hit me back yet, but if you said we can find a guard as good as Keith Sims, that's the kind of draft we needed to have. That draft like you had. Let's talk about. We're gonna get into the draft now a little bit. I want to ask you a few questions and a few prospects here because we do have the draft coming up on Thursday. Talk a little bit about that draft, your draft experience. Keith went in the second round, right? I remember you telling me that Keith would have been the pick if you weren't the pick, right? Am I imagining things, or is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. We were coming out, and I think the difference between this draft and when me and Keith came out is this draft is heavy with offensive linemen, where when me and Keith came out, it wasn't as many guys that were coming out that were, had a first round grade, as far as coming out of the draft. And so right before the draft, they had me possibly slotted to go to San Diego at the 5th pick. And if I would have went to San Diego, the Dolphins had told Keith, he was going to draft him at 9. And
So it's your fault. It's your fault.
It's my fault, man. I hate talking about it.
It worked out though.
Man, what happened? A guy named Junior Sal, who played at
pretty
USC,
good player, huh?
Junior.
He was all right.
He was monster, and he decided to come out, and then they were saying either Richmond Webb or Junior Sal. And I kind of thought about it. I said, him playing at USC, San Diego, it would make sense, but they took him at 5, and the Dolphins took me at 9, and so that pushed Keith down to the second round, and we talked about it and this and that, and I was like, I felt bad, but I was I was how you have emotions because you don't want to take money out of nobody's pocket, but man, I was so happy that I got to play with a guy like that because he made my job so easy, and we did things that being 2 rookies. I'm going to put them on the blind side of quarterback. Coach Shula did that. We were side by side. And if we messed up, we messed up together, but we had a lot of success. And it was like the thing that I think we just really connected and we communicated where we didn't even have to talk. And that our level of play really took off early and fast. And I think that was not only good for the Dolphins, but it was good for us. And I owe him so much because he made me look so good a lot of times, and I tried to return the favor a couple of times, but he probably didn't need my help too much.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it worked out though. We would love. That's amazing. Think about it in today's game, 2 starting guys on the left side, crazy. Richmond Webb into the Hall of Fame. Yeah. Well, at the end of the show, we're gonna talk about all the support and all the Hall of Fame. But yes, it's overdue. Let's get Richmond in the Hall of Fame. And at the end, I'll let you know everybody where they can go and because you got tons of support from the fans. It well deserved. Okay. So let's move to the draft now. First thing is I want to talk about a couple of things before we get into prospects here is people talk about arm length at that position. Explain to the people who you played why is arm length so important, especially for the tackle position? And can you play it with short arms?
I would say you can possibly play it with short arms. It's probably a little bit more difficult. The thing with the long arms is, one, your reach, it allows you to get your hands on the defender and help diffuse his, momentum or different, pass rush moves or whatever. But if you got short arms, then that guy can pretty much get his hands on you quicker and make the counter moves. Yeah, in the chest and stuff like that. So you got to have a long arm, but you still got to be able to ledge, which means you can't just stand straight up and because you get bull rush, you get walk back. So, but long arms is definitely long arms and pretty good feet, shuffling your feet, lateral movement. Those are some of the things they look for in a tackle and being able to anchor. Every now and then, those guys will hit you with a bull rush, and you got to be able to, sit down and anchor and stop that momentum because if not, they'll just walk you back to the quarterback.
Yeah, and that's why the shorter arm guys usually play inside, right? It's more of in a phone booth kind of deal.
Yep.
And the outside is more. And what are you looking for when you look at you're watching an offensive? And they say, hey, Richard, tell me about this lineman. What are the couple things you see looking for on tape or in a game that you mentioned? Anchor, you mentioned feet. Like what are the top, say, 3 or 4 things?
Yeah, if you're a center guard, normally you're a little bit shorter. Most of your tackles are anywhere from 6'4" to 6'7", long wingspan, good feet to where they can, not only in the pass rush, but be able to, reach and up on the lineman and maintain your base and sometimes work off to the next level to a linebacker, this and that. So those things you look at the guard, they're normally a little bit more shorter, anywhere from 6'1" to 6'4". Some guys tall play guard, but just a bulkier, wider guy, and got to be able to stop the bull rush. But if you look at some of the defensive tackles, in the NFL, you playing against guys it's 340, 350, but you got to be able to stay low, hit them, and get some movement and this and that. That's not an easy task. So it's a little bit different build, but like with the shorter arms and stuff, and you're a little bit shorter. Sometimes it allows you to get more leverage a little bit easier because you're a little bit shorter and try to move those guys and create running lanes or whatever for the running backs. And also to stop the penetration early to give the quarterback, if it's a pass, to be able to step up because the tackles normally set back and run them around. And that's why you got to be able to stop that bull rush and stuff as a guard, center guard, because that gives the quarterback a pocket to step up in.
Yeah, and how long were your arms? You had long arms.
Yeah, they're a little crooked now. They're a little crooked now, but yeah, they still long. They just got a little.
I'm gonna say, did they measure you like what, 34, 35-inch arms? Was that a thing back then, or they didn't?
Yeah, I think they're longer than 35.
So you got them. Probably, you got them Patrick Paul arms.
I had some real long arms. I just can't.
No, you can't.
35. Yeah, I just can't. So we're gonna say 35 plus. I say that.
Well, let's say that. Let's say 35 plus. Because I asked it in this draft. I asked this because all the top guys, the tackles, are a little short, or they have short arms, and they're talking about a lot of tackle to guard conversions. But the last question before we get into the prospects is, how hard is it just to say a guy who played all left tackle? Oh, okay, he can move to left guard, no problem. Or this guy can play right tackle, he can move over to left tackle. How hard is that? Like, is it as easy as everybody? Oh, just snap your finger and you move inside, or you move to the other side?
Well, I think the main thing is if they're going to make a transition from, like you say, guard to tackle to guard, sometimes it's an experiment. So if it's an experiment, the main thing I say is get that guy in camp and get him signed early so he can start taking the reps. And even if it's through the preseason, play through the preseason to see how he does at that different position or whatever, because for one, you might know, well, I know he can play tackle, but we want to try to play him at guard and see if that works. If it doesn't work, you can always kick him back out and you might have to move somebody else in. But I think that the thing is getting as many reps as possible to try to get somebody comfortable, because it's a difference in practice and game speed. And, the preseason games, they don't count, but it's a good way to get the work and get your timing and stuff down to kind of get a feel for game speed, stuff like that. So that would be the thing I would be looking to do if I looked at a guy and said, okay, yeah, he's left tackle, but I think we can play him at left guard or right guard or whatever. We're going to move him over there, but let him start getting those reps as soon as possible, learning position, learning the plays, the terminology, because the less you have to think about where you can just go out and react, that's when you really focus on it. But if you're still thinking about, do I go right or left or whatever like that, and quarterback's already going through his cadence, you got the quicker you learn it, the better success you're gonna have, because at least you know what to do. Now you just got to go out and do it.
All right, that's great information. Like Beach says, especially from somebody who's played the game at a high level. All right. Let's finish up. Let's look at a few of these prospects. More particularly the guys who are going to be potentially options at number 13. But this is a dream come true. Looking at offensive line prospects with Richmond Webb, the 13-year-old myself, I would never imagine this happening. All right. We start off at the top. He has 33-inch arms, Richmond. Will Campbell, the kid at LSU, good athlete, sub 540, 6'6", 319. Really good technician in pass pro, but people say, should he move in guard? I'll tell you, for me, who I watch a ton of the film, I like him at tackle. Yeah. I would try him there first. Your thoughts on Will Campbell?
Yeah, I remember him. Texas A&M was the SEC, so LSU is definitely one of our rivals. Remember seeing him play, and then I also watched because Jason Taylor's son played. Tight end for.
Could be a Dolphin. Could be a Dolphin in a few days.
Yeah. You always root for your teammates, kids, stuff like that. I think he could play, but I think he's got the height, he's got the weight. He's got the athletic ability, the agility, this and that. The thing is the arm length, but I think his arms might be a little short, but just looking at frame and stuff, I think he possibly could play tackle. It's just, who's going to be available. And I'm sure they like these guys over others, but this is definitely an option. That's a good thing about the draft is you got a lot of good quality offensive linemen that if one of them's gone, possibly it's other two guys or something you could look at to possibly draft to fill that need. Yeah.
I think one thing that helps him is he has really good pass pro technique in his hands. So that helps him. You got to be a technician with those short arms, but I would put him at tackle. And look at his snaps. He played 882 snaps at left tackle in 22, 805 in 23, 861 in 24. The only other position he played was only 2 snaps at right tackle in 24. So he's a left tackle. That's when I mentioned those questions at the beginning, because this is another example. Moving inside at guard. I mean, I'm sure he can play guard, but over what, 2,500 snaps in the college at left tackle?
That's a lot, and it lets you know he's been like a 3-year starter, getting that many snaps
against Florida, Alabama, all those,
Yep, he's played against the best of the best. So that's the thing. Yeah. And you look at the level of competition. He's winning against, and those are the games you want to say, okay, I don't need to see him against a Division II school. See what the rival game or this and that, and see how he performed and see how he performed on the road when you're not playing at home. The little things you look at, but for him to have that many snaps and this and that, he should be a good pick. I definitely try him at tackle. It couldn't hurt.
Yeah, I would leave him. I would leave him there. I would let him give him the shot and see what he can do. I think that's his home. I think he can go as high. He's probably going to go as high as 4 to New England, protecting Drake May. A lot of it is because he can play tackle, like the other guy we're going to talk about now, Armand Membu. I mean, freak. 4'9", 6'4". Again, a little. I mean, it sounds tall, but a little short for a tackle, right? 6'4" is probably that minimum you want for a tackle. But over 330 pounds, this guy can move in space. Richmond. I don't know if you've seen it. Big upside. He really good. Holds anchor well. I mean, but he played right tackle. He's a right tackle. His snap count is 307 and 22 at right tackle, 857 and 23 at right tackle, 824 at right tackle, and only 1 snap at one other position last year at left guard. So this is a right tackle. However, and that's probably why he's not going to go first. However, he looks like he has the tools and the traits to move to the left side. But would you stick him with that much experience, stick him at right tackle?
I would try to possibly keep him at the right tackle position. But one thing I wouldn't be afraid of, with him being 6'4", 332, I wouldn't be afraid to keep him downside at a guard. Because, 332, you run a 4.91. That's moving. That's a lot of man moving down that 40-yard dash. So, and they even have it like tackle / guard. So I could see, even if you didn't need a right tackle but needed a right guard or something, I would feel comfortable drafting a kid like this and kicking him down inside. I think he could get the job done. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I feel more comfortable moving him inside than I do Campbell. I think this guy's a Pro Bowl player at right tackle, right guard, and if you want to give him the shot at left tackle, it'd be a change for him. But I think he could handle it. But again, I feel more comfortable than him moving inside at guard. But I think Campbell goes ahead of him, possibly because somebody like New England has Drake May. They want that left tackle. But yeah, you like this kid, right?
I like this kid, and I've seen his highlight tapes. And the thing, George, I'll tell you, is I wouldn't really, if I was going to move him to left tackle, like I said, get him signed early. I mean, when you're athletic, the thing is, he just had a lot of reps over there. So get him over there, get him working as soon as possible, and that'll come. But get him over. You got to get him signed and get him over there. But I think he could play. He's a guy that could play tackle or guard. I don't think he couldn't play, but he's
I agree.
He's got to get body control. He's just not comfortable.
Yeah. If you wanted to give it a shot, but definitely right tackle and guard. And that's why I hear some people talking. If he falls to the Dolphins, don't take him because he's a right tackle. Man, you don't pass this kind of offensive lineman up. You put him in that guard. If you got to move Austin Jackson inside and you put him at right tackle, don't make that mistake.
That's nasty.
You don't pass up a great player because you have a solid player in your building. I always say this, Richmond, get as many good players in the building like Philadelphia does, like Kansas City does, like Baltimore. Figure it out later. Get as many guys in the building. You pass this kid up because he's a right tackle.
I wouldn't pass this kid. I've seen his highlight. He got a mean streak to him too.
Oh, he's a dude. Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go through a couple more guys here. This is a guy who I think is a really good shot to be there at 13. And I would say with him or one of the corners is probably the biggest percentage of ended up being a Dolphin. He fits the Dolphins. He's got great movement skills in space. He's really good. He's patient with the combo blocks. I saw Richmond. And I like him at guard or tackle. Again, I'll give you his snaps. Kelvin Banks, very simple. 857 at left tackle in 22. 983 snaps in 23 at left tackle. 2024, 934 snaps. You want to guess how many snaps he's had at any other offensive line position in Richmond?
Zero.
So what do you do with that? What do you do with that?
Yeah,
I think he can play guard. He's built like a guard.
He is, and I watched he's a pretty good tackle. I watched him at Texas, but I think he's played probably since freshman year. But he's from the Houston area, and I've watched him play several games, and he plays huge in the big. Only game I seen him struggle was I think I saw him play against Georgia. But other than that, was that last year or the year before?
Was that against Georgia? Was that against Jalen Walker?
It could have been against Jalen Walker. Yeah.
I watched so many guys. I'm confused about what.
Yeah, I know when you start watching them.
It all runs together.
This guy, I definitely, I think he definitely played tackle the way I saw him in college. But he's kind of he probably played 15, but he probably could add another 5 or 10 if you needed him to play guard and get down in there. But yeah, he's a really good player. Yeah, I like him a whole lot.
And you know what he does? This is why I think he could be the pick. He's got a ton of experience at left tackle. You put him at guard, try him out, and if Paul doesn't work out, if you see, we all hope Paul works out, but we don't know the answer to that. You put this kid at left tackle because if I'm being honest, he's probably coming in day one as probably a better left tackle prospect than Patrick Paul, and Paul can't play inside. He's too long. He's
long. Because he's like
6'7". He's got like 36
He's a true 6'7". Yeah.
You know what I like about Paul? You know what impressed me about him? He did 31 reps at 225 with 36-inch arms. People don't realize that.
Long arms?
Yeah, that's impressive. Jake Long did that too. I remember Jake Long had people don't realize that. You know at Richmond, a guy who has that long arms and puts up that kind of reps, it's usually the barrel-chested inside, 31, 32-inch arm guards that put up the reps. But when you're putting up 31 reps at that's Paul's got all the tools, but he's a backup plan for Paul, and he's a day one starter at guard. He makes a lot of sense if they don't go, because everybody's saying corner Richmond because of with the Ramsey stuff, and they maybe don't have a starter, but he makes a lot of sense though, right? As far as that where he fits.
It makes a lot of sense because I'm gonna tell you something. You're upgrading the offensive line. And even if you got to move from the guard and leave Paul at tackle, you upgrade the offensive line, and you're creating to where the competition is getting higher and higher. So the guys that make the second team, they know the reason they made the second team. But this kid here can play, and he's not going to be a guy that's going to be a backup. I'm going to tell you that he's a starter.
He starts day one. Like Skunk, shout out to Skunk. Shout out to everybody in the chat. We got over 85 people, almost 100 people. Come on over to YouTube, guys. If you're watching on Twitter, please come on over to YouTube. hit that like and subscribe button. We're here with Richmond Webb. We're here with Richmond Webb breaking down O-line prospects for the Dolphins. What better person to do that? This is a dream come true for me. Yeah, I agree with Skunk. I'm so tired of the experts nitpicking on Banks. The dude can ball. He's another one that can play left tackle, left guard, really good in space. I agree. He's at 13. Some might say it's a little rich, but depending who's on the board. This draft is weird. Like the Dolphins can go in 4 or 5 different directions and to be a position of need. So I have a hard time figuring out what the right thing to do is for them. And I, everybody says corner, but I still think they might go O-line in the trenches here. As far as that, I'll ask you, I'll save your prediction. What would you do at the end at 13? We'll hold on to that. Let's get through another guy. I know you haven't seen a lot of Simmons. I'll tell you I'll tell you what I know about him. This is a pure left tackle. I was watching Donovan Jackson. I know he's the guard that played for them. Simmons actually got hurt. Donovan Jackson went over to left tackle and actually was pretty good. He'll probably be a late first, early second guard tackle, Donovan Jackson. But I watched Donovan Jackson, and when he played next to him, I couldn't keep my eyes off Josh Simmons. I'm telling you, his ability to move laterally, the ability to mirror the rusher, his feet, he's got probably the best feet of any tackle in this draft. If he was healthy, I think we're talking about him as the number 1 tackle in this draft. I don't know how much you've seen of Josh Simmons, but the injury is the only thing holding him back. But he'd be a pure left tackle. You'd be coming in, he'd be taking over Terron Armstead.
Was his injury like ACL or
knee? He had a knee injury. Knee. I believe.
Yeah.
I'll look it up the exact injury for you, but yeah. What did you watch him play much?
I watched him play a little. I don't watch a lot of Ohio State. I knew this one. I normally tend to watch probably more SEC than anything since A&M's in the SEC, and even if they're not playing, I try to watch teams that they're probably going to have to play. So Ohio State, times I did watch them, they had a really, really good football team. That's why they won the national championship. But, he's got the size, the frame. Like I say, he didn't run the 40 or nothing like that. That doesn't concern me. But what I do like when he said elite slide lateral, that's what you look for. The kick step, sliding out, getting on to defenders and this and that. And he say he can mirror rushers, so that's another way to, he's got good lateral move. This guy goes this, try to change directions, this and that. And then hand punch power, which a lot of times can disrupt the pass rush momentum. Once you disrupt that, then you just got to move your feet laterally, this and that. So, it sounds like he's really smooth operator.
Yeah,
he looks good just looking at his body in
tell,
uniform,
right?
stuff like that. Yeah, you can look at him and tell. Yeah, he put in work. Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah. I mean, I do these. I did about 120 of these player cards. Watched a lot of film. Put these scouting reports together. So I appreciate you reading it, and it looks like it makes sense. So I appreciate that. So I'm doing a good job then, right?
You the man, George. I'm telling you, the man, brother.
All right. So let's move on to a guard. I know you didn't know much about. I mean, Zabel's a North Dakota State kid. He's a kid. Look, he can play all the way on the line. Zabel played, unlike the other guys, in 22, Zabel took 13 snaps at left tackle, 152 at left guard, 378 at right tackle. 23, 686 at right tackle, 211 at left guard. But then last year, he primarily took 961 snaps at left tackle. Had a great Senior Bowl week. The guy can play. He's a nasty dude. Can play all over the line. Right tackle, right guard. He's a sleeper at 13. I wouldn't say that would happen, but if we're looking for a sleeper, but he's a guy, his versatility, toughness, he finishes in the run game. The level of competition doesn't concern me because when he went up to competition, he played well. So, and he did well in the Senior Bowl. So, so versatility, how important is that when you're drafting a lineman, or do you rather a guy is great at one position, or does it worry you that, okay, he can play a lot, but what is his true position?
No, either way, I just need to look at the eye test, and if you can play, you can play. I think what's for me impressive about this kid is he's played 4 positions. He played at North Dakota State, but when he went to the Senior Bowl, he had a really good week of practice and played well. And that reminds me of me because that really helped elevate my draft.
Talk about that. Talk about it. Yeah,
because a lot the Senior Bowl back then, I'm sure it's the same way now. The Senior Bowl was one of those games you're gonna have, real hard, tough physical practices, but it's one of those either you're gonna elevate or you're gonna tank. And if you're scared of the challenge, don't go. But a lot of guys wouldn't go to the Senior Bowl because it was like, no, you work too hard, and if I have a week of practice or something, your draft stock could go down, which is true. But I was like, man, I got to take that shot. And I took it and worked in my favor. And I think it's going to work in this kid's favor too. But like you said, guard or tackle, this and that. And all four spots. So he can play everything. He might be able to play a little center. But when you get a guy like this, I wouldn't have an issue taking him. Because he can play.
Last guy we're going to talk about, the more inside guy. Again, there's plenty more guys that I would love to talk about, but these are more pick 13 options. Everybody says he can't do it because he doesn't fit the scheme. I think, is he an ideal wide zone scheme fit? No, but he's played against top level competition in the SEC and he moves people. His upper body strength is massive and they need a little bit of a power element. Like, you don't have to run outside zone all the time. They can switch it up, and I think he's capable. Is he ideal fit? No, but could he do it? I think he can. I think it's being blown out of proportion, and he's a leader, Richmond. What do you know about Tyler Booker?
Yeah, I watched Alabama, like I said, SEC guy. But just look at him in his stance there. He looks like a guard. I mean, you can tell he's a kind of a little bit thicker, wider guy. But if you look at him on film, the thing I like about him, I know they saying he can't play wide zone, but I do know when you need 4th and 1, or 3rd and 2, or 3rd and 3, this is the guy that say, hey, we come Booker, we coming behind you. And he's played against really good competition in college.
All the top guys,
so when you play at that level and you play, it's like it's a no deal. Sometimes, like I say, they make their notes and stuff like that, but I don't have a the only thing they said, like lateral movement, which you don't have to have a lot of lateral movement at guard because you're kind of tight, so it's not like you're playing tackle. So I think
the only thing is,
I think you could do it.
Good call in the short yard. I mean, we need what he brings. We need. It's just that, and I think he can. Yeah, he might not be. He might not be the most athletic guy, but I think he can get. I mean, he knows. He understands. He has good technique. He understands. He's smart. He's a leader. I think he can play and plug him in, and he brings that power element that they need. And he's a lead. And one thing we need leadership on this team. He's that type of guy. So I think he's another guy you could take at 13. So there's just like everybody says, who are they going to take? Look, it's probably a corner. Or it's probably an offensive lineman. It's probably the kid out of Texas, Barron, or Will Johnson. The corner out of the Michigan kid. Apparently, he's got a knee thing now. I love him. Will Johnson. People sleep talking about him. Pure film, just on tape. He's a top 5, 6, 7 player. But so there's different routes they can go because they need so many things, and the draft does align with what they need. So it's almost hard to, I have trouble figuring out what I would do in their spot because, depending who's there, I'd probably go with Will Johnson be my number one guy, or one of the 2 tackles we talked about at the top, Embo and Campbell. But if you go with Kelvin Banks, even if you did a Tyler Booker or even a Donovan Jackson, I know people think that's a reach, but if you're trying to build the trenches, there's good players who can fill the need for them. All right, so that's the offensive line draft for the Dolphins, who we think could be available there at pick 13 with Richmond. All right, Richmond, give me your prediction. What do you think the Dolphins do on night 1 at pick 13, bearing no trade down? Give me a guy you like for them.
It's definitely an offensive lineman. I would say for me, probably Membo or Banks. Those two kind of guys. But the only thing, and I'll tell everything, and I say this every year because people do their mock drafts and all that.
Yeah.
But when you're picking 13, and I see some crazy things happen, a couple of teams will take players out of position and throw the whole draft and be like, hey, what's happening? So the only thing I say, you know, speculate, but don't get your heart set on somebody at that slot. Just be prepared to say, if they take somebody else, it's a Dolphin. We're gonna ride with them. But the draft sometimes get crazy, and you be like, man, nobody expects it. And even the analysts on TV, they be like, whoa, we didn't know this and that. So it's just that's one of the things. But I would say offensive lineman, and the two that kind of stick out to me is Mimbo from Missouri, and hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right.
Yeah.
And Banks from
Texas.
But if it was one of those other guys, I would be good
that's
with
what
it.
I'm saying. Yeah.
Because you're addressing the need, and sometimes you don't fall in love so much with the player. Even though you really like the player, you can still follow them even on another team, unless it's the Jets or something like that. But it's the position and the need, and that's what sometimes we get wrapped up in the player. Oh, we got to have this guy, and they go a different direction. It just pisses people off. But as long as they draft the needs and do a good job of that, it gives you an opportunity to get better, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I always say I'm a best player available guy. You got to be careful though. You can't force a need there. But I think the players that are going to be the best player available are going to be a corner, even a safety, a Malachi Starks or Emon Ward. You're all going to be in positions of need. So this is where it's kind of different this year. Gloria, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. We did visuals on every position, over 120 prospects in total, breaking down. If you want to go back some of the previous episodes, if you really like that, I appreciate it. We put a lot of work in it. Thank you, Gloria. Thank you, everybody in the chat. I agree. I really like Donovan Jackson. I don't see him at 13, a trade back. But if I'm saying worst case scenario, you did something like that, you could convince me on it because he's also really good. He played really well at left tackle when he took over for Simmons. So not my ideal pick, but you could sell me on it. All right. So we'll head out on this. Talk about the Hall of Fame support. Is there different websites or people who are running it? I know Dolph Freaky and they do all great things. Talk about where they can find you and where they can support the Hall of Fame stuff and where they can find you on social.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter most of the time. Richmond Webb. I got an Instagram. I'm trying to get better on Instagram. I'm gonna get on there all the time, but it's at The Real Richmond Webb, and Facebook I'm Richmond Webb. But like you said, Dolph Freaky, I think Danny Johnson, any of the leaders of the fan club groups have come together collectively and really been supporting and pushing my name for the Hall of Fame. So I tell them thank you all the time, and some of the fans I run to, I appreciate it because y'all don't have to do that. But when people take a interest or take their valuable time, because everybody's time is valuable, to try to promote you for something that they feel is deserving. I definitely appreciate it. But Dolph Freaky would definitely be one to kind of reach out to if it was something you could do. I think once the voting started, they step on that more than I do. But we can go in and vote and stuff like that. But that's how you can find me on social media. And normally on Sundays during the Dolphin games, I try to tweet with the fans and stuff like that. So I don't tweet a lot now. Ain't too much going on. But once the season starts, every Sunday we can all kind of get together and go back and forth and tweet. And I try to answer some questions, or we just, talk back and forth and have a good time. So I always look forward to doing that with the fans.
Yeah, man, we appreciate you. It's long overdue. You get the support because you're deserving, so you should get in. Just ask Bruce Smith, right? I know he was something to handle,
brother. Yeah, that's a handful.
So, guys, thanks everybody who tuned in. We'll be I'll be back Wednesday with Jason Sarney with some draft stuff. We'll probably do one more final mock draft. We'll have other things planned. Of course, Thursday's a draft. We'll probably go live before the draft. Nothing's finalized yet, but we'll definitely recap everything that happened in the draft. So stick with the Finn's Faithful podcast here. Subscribe to the channel. Set the notifications on YouTube so you know when we go live. We will see you guys soon. It's an exciting week. It's draft week. So hopefully the Dolphins can add some players and do some things different this year would be nice. All right, guys, as always, stay Fins faithful. We are out.